Welcome to Student Organization Risk Management Training, brought to you by Student Activities. Why are we here today? Well, in 2007, the Texas legislature added a section to the Texas Education Code regarding risk management training for officers and advisors of student organizations. It requires the university to cover 8 topics related to risk management, that specified organization officers attend training annually, that advisors attend training once, and that these officers and advisors report on the training's content at a meeting of the full membership of the organization. As previously mentioned, we are required to cover 8 topics, which include alcoholic beverages and illegal drugs, hazing, sexual abuse and harassment, fire and other safety issues, travel, behavior at parties and other events held by a student org, adoption of risk management plan, and issues regarding persons with disabilities. Here we go. The first topic is possession and use of alcoholic beverages and illegal drugs. Hopefully you know that Texas law mandates that one must be 21 or over to possess or drink alcohol. Being at the university with a mixture of students above and below legal drinking age causes problems for students and student orgs when underage students decide, or of-age students enable them to drink. As a result, there are university policies regarding alcohol that supplement state law. Therefore, a student and student org is not only subject to criminal and/or civil proceedings for violating the law, but also to university disciplinary proceedings through the Dean of Students, as it relates to both alcohol and illegal drugs. So if a student or advisor is found in violation of the law, they could face penalties ranging from community service to jail time. And if found in violation of the UNT Code of Student Conduct, a student could face sanctions ranging from a warning through expulsion. University policy prohibits the unlawful possession, use, or distribution of alcohol and illegal drugs on all university property, except as expressly permitted by law and university policy. Exceptions would include things like official tailgating and at events with appropriate permission. Student organizations desiring to sell, serve, or consume any type of alcoholic beverage on campus must obtain permission at least 15 business days in advance via the alcohol use request form, which is included in the event application. Don't worry, we'll talk about that later. If your student org desires to have alcohol at an on-campus event, please refer to the use of alcoholic beverages policy for more info.
What do you do if you find yourself in a situation that someone you're with has a suspected overdose? With regard to suspected alcohol poisoning or alcohol overdose, remember the acronym must help to look for signs: mental confusion, unresponsive, snoring or gasping for air, throwing up, hyperthermia or cold clammy skin, erratic breathing, loss of consciousness, and/or pale bluish skin. For signs of an opioid overdose, remember the acronym BLUE. Breathing is erratic, shallow, or absent, lips and fingertips are blue, unresponsive, and/or eyes have pinpoint pupils. If you observe any of the symptoms for suspected alcohol poisoning or opioid overdose, the first step is to call 911 and provide as much information as you can. In a scenario with a suspected opioid overdose, if you have naloxone available, use it. Naloxone is a drug that can reverse an opioid overdose, and it is safe to use even if you are not sure if the overdose is related to opioid use or not. It's available over the counter at pharmacies, including at UNT, and there are many community resources in the area that offer naloxone for free. If the person is breathing, place the individual into a recovery position by rolling them onto their side with their hands placed underneath their head, using their knee to stabilize them and prevent them from moving, like in the graphic you see here. Be sure to lay them on a flat surface, free from obstruction. If the person is not breathing, provide rescue breaths or perform CPR if you are trained. No matter what, do not leave the person alone. Stay with them until first responders arrive. Being in a situation involving a potential overdose is scary, and you may be worried about getting in trouble with law enforcement or the university if you reach out for help. Rest assured, there are some things in place to protect you as you intervene to help save a life. In 2011, Texas passed the 911 Lifeline Law to provide limited immunity to a person who seeks assistance from first responders for alcohol-related emergency situations. In addition, UNT may grant amnesty to a student when providing assistance to a suspected overdose of any type. In short, if you suspect an overdose, call for help. For more information or to ask questions, reach out to the UNT Recovery and Intervention Support and Education, or RISE Center, which provides resources for students seeking info about substance use as well as recovery.
Our second topic is hazing. No person or student group may engage in, condone, or encourage hazing. As defined in state law and UNT policy, hazing is any intentional, knowing, or reckless act occurring on or off campus by one person alone or acting with others, directed against a student for the purpose of joining, being initiated into, affiliating with, holding office in, or maintaining membership in an organization, regardless of whether the student victim may have consented to or acquiesced in the activity. Hazing includes any type of physical brutality, such as whipping, beating, striking, branding, electronic shocking, placing of a harmful substance on the body, or similar activity. Sleep deprivation, exposure to the elements, confinement in a small space, calisthenics, or similar activity that subjects the student to an unreasonable risk of harm or that adversely affects their mental or physical health or safety. Consumption of a food, liquid, or other substance that subjects the student to an unreasonable risk of harm or that adversely affects their mental or physical health or safety. Coercing a student to consume a drug or an alcoholic beverage or liquor in an amount that would lead a reasonable person to believe that the student is intoxicated. Any activity that induces, causes, or requires the student to perform a duty or task that involves a violation of the Texas Penal Code, Code of Student Conduct, other UNT policies, or state or federal law. Keep in mind that a student's willingness to participate in any of these activities does not mean that an activity is not considered hazing, nor is it a defense to any charges of violating UNT policy or state law. So just because a student doesn't mind or wants to participate in the activity, if it means any of the previously stated criteria, it's probably still hazing. In fact, even the student consenting to hazing is subject to discipline. Hazing is not only a violation of the Code of Student Conduct, but also violation of state law. A student or advisor violates this policy in state law if they engage in hazing, solicit, encourage, direct, aid, or attempt to aid another to engage in hazing, recklessly permit hazing to occur, or have first-hand knowledge of the planning of a specific hazing incident, or have first-hand knowledge that a specific hazing incident has occurred, and knowingly fail to report that knowledge in writing to the Dean of Students or other appropriate university official. So even if you don't engage in hazing itself, as an advisor or officer, if you know about it or allow it to happen, you are in fact violating university policy and state law. What can happen to individuals who engage in hazing? A student could be expelled from UNT and is also subject to civil and criminal penalties for violating state law. The offense of failing to report an incident is a Class B misdemeanor. An offense that does not cause serious bodily injury to another is a Class B misdemeanor. Any offense that causes serious bodily injury to another is a Class A misdemeanor. Any offense that causes the death of another is a felony. Depending on the severity of the case, hazing penalties could include a fine, time in jail, and/or community service. In addition, a student organization violates this policy and state law if it condones or encourages hazing, or if an officer, authorized representative, or any combination of members, potential new members, or alumni of the organization commits or assists in the commission of hazing. What can happen to student orgs that engage in hazing? An org could be suspended from UNT and is also subject to civil and criminal penalties for violating state law. That could include a misdemeanor offense punishable by a fine of $5,000 to $10,000, or if the court finds that the offense caused personal injury, property damage, or other loss, a fine of up to double the amount lost or expenses incurred because of the injury, damage, or loss. The university may elect not to pursue disciplinary sanctions for a violation of this policy against students who voluntarily and in good faith provide information to the Dean of Students or an appropriate university official related to hazing. Similarly, a person who voluntarily reports a hazing incident may be immune from civil or criminal liability if they report the incident before being contacted about it by UNT and cooperate in good faith throughout any institutional process. However, a person who reports their own personal act of hazing or who makes a report in bad faith or with malice may be subject to university disciplinary action in addition to civil or criminal prosecution. For prevention resources or to report hazing, see the Dean of Students website or call the anonymous UNT hazing hotline, 940-369-STOP.
The third topic for today is sexual abuse and harassment. Content warning. The upcoming discussion covers these sensitive topics and lasts approximately 3 minutes. It's a violation of criminal and civil laws as well as the Code of Student Conduct for students or student groups to engage in acts of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, sexual coercion, sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking as defined by state and federal laws and university policies. Sexual harassment is defined in the code as unwelcome, sex-based verbal or physical conduct that, in the employment context, unreasonably interferes with a person's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Or, in the education context, is sufficiently severe, persistent, or pervasive that the conduct interferes with a student's ability to participate in or benefit from educational programs or activities. Conduct is sufficiently severe, persistent, or pervasive if its frequent, threatening, or humiliating nature unreasonably interferes with or limits the student's ability to participate in or benefit from the university's educational program or activities. Or, when the conduct can reasonably be considered to create an intimidating, hostile, abusive, or offensive educational environment. Some examples of conduct that might be considered sexual harassment include, but aren't limited to, repeated and unwanted requests for dates, sexual flirtations or propositions of sexual nature, subtle pressure for a sexual relationship, sexist remarks about a person's clothing, body, or sexual activities, unnecessary touching, patting, hugging, or brushing against a person's body, direct or implied threats that submission to sexual advances will affect or be a condition of employment, work status, grades, or a letter of recommendation. Conduct of sexual nature that causes humiliation or discomfort, such as use of inappropriate terms of address, and sexually explicit or sexist comments, questions, or jokes. A violation of sexual harassment under the code will result in a minimum sanction of conduct probation, which can affect a student's ability to serve in leadership roles for 1 calendar year. Anyone who makes a false report of sexual misconduct is subject to disciplinary action by the university. But a report is not false simply because an investigation did not find sufficient evidence to substantiate the alleged violation. What do you do if you are a victim in need of help? Students are encouraged to report suspected sexual misconduct or harassment to the university's Title IX office or the Dean of Students. Do what you need to do to feel safe. Call 911 to report imminent danger of harm or to report criminal activity. If you need help but are not in imminent danger for an incident that happened on campus, call the UNT Police Department. If it happened elsewhere in Denton, call the Denton Police Department. If it happened outside of Denton, call the law enforcement agency that has appropriate jurisdiction. And remember, you do not have to go through this alone. You can reach out to someone you trust for support. The Denton County Friends of the Family 24-hour crisis hotline can provide advice and options for how to proceed.
The fourth topic is fire and other safety issues, including the possession and use of a firearm or other weapon or of an explosive device. This is a combination of a number of policies all in one section related to safety issues. University policy requires students and student orgs to follow fire and safety code within buildings, which means enforcing the fire capacity within rooms for meetings and events. Before you have a meeting or event, know the capacity of the room, and don't let in more people than the maximum. University policy prohibits camping on or overnight use of university property without approval, with a few exceptions like tailgating. For more info, see the Prohibition of Camping on University Property policy. In 2015, the Texas legislature approved campus carry, which allows the possession of concealed handguns on campus by individuals who are licensed to carry. This applies to all faculty, staff, students, guests, visitors, as well as individuals and organizations doing business on behalf of the university on campus premises. It does not apply to commissioned peace officers. By university policy, however, there are some activities and locations on campus where handguns are still prohibited. For example, where a sporting event is taking place, including intercollegiate, sports club, and intramural competitions at the Physical Education Building, Bonson Gymnasium Building, Pole Recreation Center, and all intramural athletic fields. Where large-scale events happen, such as Union and Gateway ballrooms, Union Lyceum, Coliseum, RTVF Theater, Main Auditorium, Murchison Performing Arts Center, and Vortman Concert Hall. Where special student services occur on campus, including Goolsby Chapel and Union Meditation Room, and any place that a religious service is taking place. This list does not include all activities and locations prohibited, just those that are most likely to impact student organizations. When an organizational activity meets the criteria for prohibiting concealed carry, signage must be posted in compliance with the Texas statute in the areas where concealed handguns are prohibited. However, it's in the organization's best interest to inform attendees in advance that concealed handguns are prohibited in these locations. For more information and a list of all activities and locations that prohibits handguns, visit campuscarry.unt.edu. It's a violation of the code to have unauthorized use of possession or ammunition, explosives, or other objects that are dangerous or flammable or that could cause damage by fire or explosion to persons or property. It's also a violation of the code to tamper with or misuse security or safety equipment like fire alarms.
The fifth topic for today is travel to a destination outside the area in which the institution is located. If your student org is traveling to a retreat location, competition, or otherwise, you must follow the student travel policy, which is mandated by state law. The policy applies to student travel for activities or events that are university organized or university sponsored and located more than 25 miles from the campus where the travel originates. The policy discusses different safety precautions for different modes of travel, including, among others, following federal and state laws that encourage safe travel, use of seatbelts, maintaining a 15-passenger van capacity to a maximum of 10 individuals, upholding individual student driving limits and travel time restrictions, and prohibition of travel with weapons unless otherwise authorized. If the travel meets the criteria of the policy, an org must obtain written approval for the travel from its UNT faculty staff advisor, or the department head responsible for funding or organizing the travel before the date of the event or activity.
The sixth topic is behavior at parties and other events held by a student organization. Much of this topic is indirectly covered in previous sections, like alcohol, sexual abuse, and hazing. If a student org is holding an event on campus, it must submit an event application on OrgSync at least 15 business days prior to the event if the event is considered at least a little risky to people or facilities. That may include if the org is expecting more than 100 people in attendance, serving food and/or beverages, selling tickets for admission, inviting off-campus guests, inviting minors, handling hazardous materials like fire, a sledgehammer, chemicals, etc., serving alcohol, or planning any kind of physical activity like dancing, a softball tournament, or building structures. The decision about whether an event is a little risky is at the discretion of the university, not the student organization. So if there is a doubt about whether this deadline is applicable to an organization's event, err on the side of caution and submit it by the 15 business day deadline. The sooner the better. Some event applications will be sent to the Event Safety Committee, or ESC, for review. When that happens, the organization will need to attend an ESC meeting to discuss its plans. The purpose of ESC is to ensure that all org events, with possible risks associated with them, are executed in the safest way possible. ESC will determine stipulations that the org will need to comply with in order to hold the event, which could include things like using wristbands, hiring police officers, or purchasing event insurance.
The seventh topic is adoption by a student organization of a risk management plan. If your organization is part of the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life, you likely already have one. Outside of those orgs, if yours has a national affiliation, the national organization should be able to help you create a risk management plan. If not, Student Activities can help. A risk management plan should include standards to guide the organization in reducing risk at community service activities, socials, when traveling, and any other activity that your specific org is likely to partake in. For example, say your organization is hosting some sort of performance event that is open to anyone. Part of the risk management plan would be to, first, identify risks that exist or bad things that could happen for each activity at the event. In this case, one potential risk is the injury of a performer on stage or even an attendee in the audience. Second, document ways to reduce the identified risk and prevent potentially harmful things from happening. This may look like checking the stage for cracks or tripping hazards prior to use and making sure electrical cords are taped down so that people don't trip over them. Third, create a plan of action for what you'll do if something bad does happen. In this case, have information handy on the nearest hospital, train event staff on the location of facility exits, and have a first aid kit at the event, so that you are ready to take action if you need to. As you probably know, we live in a society that loves to sue, and unfortunately, if something bad happens, the person is likely to sue the org, officers of the org, and possibly others. That should probably scare you a little bit. But the good news is, in a court of law, if you can show that you created and followed the protocol listed within your risk management plan, your personal and organizational liability will be decreased.
The eighth and final topic today is issues regarding persons with disabilities. State and federal law mandate equal access for people with disabilities and prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in programs and activities, both public and private, that receive federal financial assistance. Additionally, by policy, UNT does not unlawfully discriminate on the basis of disability in its educational programs and activities. As UNT receives federal funds, it must ensure that the university community, including student orgs, avoids discrimination and provides equal access in its activities. It is therefore the organization's duty to make sure an accommodation is provided if it is needed. So if a student with a disability wants to join your organization or attend an event or activity, the org needs to ensure it is accessible. For example, for a student with a hearing impairment, it may be necessary to provide that student with a sign language interpreter at the organization's event. By policy, students with disabilities should register with the Office of Disability Access to verify the disability and thus be eligible to request an accommodation. The vast majority of accommodation requests are simple and inexpensive, and there are resources on campus to help you with these. Accommodation issues can become serious complaints or even lawsuits, so if your organization receives a request for accommodation, talk to Student Activities or the Office of Disability Access for help, which may include helping the organization explore ways to fund accommodations. The Office of Disability Access is located in Sage Hall and online at disability.unt.edu.
To wrap all of this up, here's what you should know about the Code of Student Conduct as it relates to risk management. As we've mentioned, the code applies to student and student orgs. For individual students, sanctions include a warning to expulsion. A student org may be held responsible for the actions and conduct of its members when one or more of its members knew or should have known that another member, acting in the capacity of their membership, engaged in conduct that violates the code. Student orgs found in violation of the code are subject to the same conduct procedures and sanctions as individual students. For orgs, though, sanctions vary from warning to loss of privileges, which includes the ability to host events, to suspension. They cannot be expelled permanently. Finally, the code applies to conduct that occurs on campus, at university activities, and off campus when the conduct could adversely affect the university community, the pursuit of the university's educational mission, or could create a hostile environment for a student on campus. In a nutshell, this means that you represent UNT and your organization wherever you are. If you have questions about any of the material in this presentation, contact Student Activities in Union 345 at 940-565-3807 or at student.activities@unt.edu. Thank you for your time.